Thank you, everyone. We're about to start. Thank you, everyone, for coming to One Artist Talk here at Akwaaba. Laura's going to address you. She's busy. But we're about to start. We had 2 sessions. These artists for 1 hour, and then we have another group of talented artists for the second hour. If you want to stay, please stay. These are very interesting artists. My name is Joel. I'm an artist as well as a curator. I'm a artist. I will be moderating. And please ask questions at the end. This is very important. Thank you. We're about to start. Let's start. Armisa?
Marissa.
I apologize.
That's okay.
Let me ask you.
Narendra.
Tell us where you're from. I know this is your work here.
Yes, that's nice.
This is her work. Where you're from, and tell us about your work.
So I'm a Guyanese-born artist. I was born in Guyana, South America. I grew up in New Jersey my whole life.
Where?
Specifically New Milford. It's like a small town up towards like Hackensack, Teaneck. I spent some time, I've lived in New Jersey and New York for the last, I guess, 25 plus years at this point.
Tell us about your art. Do you normally work in black and white and colors?
I did do some black and white pieces before, but when Laura told me that she was doing specifically a black and white show, I decided that my black and white pieces were from 2 years ago, and I didn't want to do something 2 years old, so I wanted to create something new. So I challenged myself to find a way to take my current style and see how would I adapt it to black and white, and I actually had a lot of fun doing it, and I think it actually created a new sort of style in there. So this kind of evolved me a little bit, this show itself.
And you normally just work on the colors? What kind of artist are you?
Acrylics were new for me since 2015. Before that, I always started most of my artwork in oils. And I then started going into spray paint, so I tend to be a mixed media artist, so this is actually mostly acrylic, but there is some spray paint in there, and there's also some oil-based marker as well. So I'm varied in that sense, but right now acrylic, oil, and spray.
Were you a tagger? Did you graffiti?
No, I really wish I was that cool, but I wasn't. So I don't tag. I actually have been encouraged by a lot of graffiti artists to create a tag, and the one time I tried to, I wrote my whole name out, and they said, no, that's not how you do it. I was like, but I want them to know my whole name, my whole name. I was like, I'm not hiding behind any name. So that's why I can't, because I'll probably get arrested. Yeah.
But where did you go to school? Or did you go to art school?
I did not go to art school. I decided I was going to be rich, so I got a degree in English. It's funny if you've got a degree in English, you know what I mean. No, so I didn't go to art school. I thought about it, but honestly at the time I was nervous about, my future, if I was to rely on art solely for my income. So I tried to kind of go a different route. So I got my degrees in English, and also I also got a master's degree in publishing. So I stayed with the arts, but I went with writing. And then once I felt like I was getting pulled back to art, no matter what I did. And then it's sort of in 2017, I had this trip to Jamaica, and then I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was being in the islands, but everything changed, and I felt like it was just like an uncorking or something like that. So I had to let it out. So then I just dove right back in. So I don't have a lot of formal experience. I'm just out here painting.
Well, it looks like you do. So.
I do my best. Yeah.
Now, are you shown anywhere else?
Currently, no. So I'm not showing in any galleries right now. I would say that a lot of my work, I've been trying to work on murals and doing more large-scale work as much as I can. So the most recent piece that I did was a piece in Koreatown in LA. So that was fun, and I got just small mural work right now, Miami, LA, and the next upcoming thing, if anybody wants to follow along on social media, is I'm going to be painting in Guyana in South America America. So I'm making a trip back home specifically seeking abandoned places and properties to convert into art installations, as well as I will be doing some work in Trinidad coming up in May.
What did you say?
I'm converting basically.
Oh, after that, right? In Trinidad.
Oh, in Trinidad I will be painting as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad I got a chance to talk to you. I'm sure many of us from Newark as well. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
We'll come back to you. I want to talk to Tenzin.
Ikeda.
Tenzin is the print in the front. Since you walked in.
Very perspective.
Oh, this one right there. The printmaker, right? Tell us about yourself.
So,
Where you
I'm Tenzin Ikeda, born and raised in Brooklyn. I live in Jersey now for the past 8 years. I basically kind of taught myself how to draw, looking, copying, tracing, and I really kind of would draw kind of periodically. It was just kind of an interest here and there. And it wasn't until I was in high school, I went to John Jay High School in Carslow, and we had an art fair, and one of the people that was there was from FIT, the Fashion Institution of Technology. And he was, you know, it was like, oh, okay, what's your school about, yada yada, and he said, oh, you needed a portfolio. And I had no idea what that was. And so he said, but, you know, you can come and do Saturday classes. So that's what I did. I went to FIT on Saturdays. I took interior design, and I took graphic design. And I built this portfolio based on projects that I did there, and just my own kind of little drawings and stuff like that. And I got into 2 schools, FIT and School of Visual Arts. And I ended up going to Visual Arts because it was a 4-year program. And simultaneously, at 17, I left home, I lived on my own, and, you know, no kind of negative things behind that, but I just decided I needed to leave. And so that's what I did, and went to school a semester, dropped out. One of the drawing teachers let me stay there, and went back, and I was working full-time, and going to school full-time, and just drawing and creating. And at SBA, I decided to focus on fine arts. I was a graphics major. I decided to focus on fine arts because it gave me more flexibility. And so I did that. I didn't graduate from SBA because I was living on my own. And at one point, the school said you would have to go back. I would have to go back full time during the day in order to get a degree, and that wasn't going to happen. So at that point, I was like, the hell with it. Why do I really need school? I'm an artist. I'm doing, you know. So, and I just did my art. I've worked for artists. I worked for this one artist named Richard R. Schwager for years, for like 6 years. And at the time, I was painting, doing a lot of painting, doing mixed media stuff. So in the studio, so Richard was a sculptor, so it was basically like a wood shop. So we'd go in, I'd take like old crates or just any unused wood and create painting circuses. And I did that for a while. Then I stopped working for him and did all kinds of odd jobs, but I kept painting, I kept doing stuff on paper. I've even danced, you know, for about 4 years. Went to Japan, performed there, performed for different choreographer friends of mine. And just, you know, kind of pursued art. And that's kind of, you know, worked at, like, I still have a gig that I go to, but I've always worked. Some of my pieces are the Schomburg several years ago bought 4 of my pieces. I have pieces in other collections, all print stuff, publications, things like that. The printmaking kind of came about because there was a lag in between, so I danced, and then I kind of stopped, and I was doing these works on paper. So, and they were kind of similar to the paintings that I was doing, which were, the paintings had, they were kind of mixed media, so paper, fabrics, any kind of found natural fibers and stuff like that. That's how I was painting. And so the paperwork started like that. And it wasn't until I went to the Art Students League in Manhattan on 57th Street, and I went to just check it out. For years I was telling people they should go there, and I had never been there myself because it's cheap. So I was like, okay, let me just go. I went to the print studio. People ignored me. I just looked around. I had no idea what I was looking at. They gave me a list. I bought everything on the list, even though I didn't have to. And then I just kind of gravitated. I did other kind of printing mediums like etching and mostly etching, and then relief printing. And I just really gravitated towards relief printing, which is the linoleum and woodcuts. And it's just really evolved from there. I was doing a lot of color work. At the beginning, it was like small little kind of simple black and white work, and then I was doing a lot of color work. And then just recently, it's been kind of more of going back to black and white.
Now, tell us about the subject, religious.
Well,
religion.
it's more, I mean,
Is that true?
there's some truth to it. So these pieces are based on a Yoruba masquerade costume called an Egungun. And it's an ancestral masquerade, and a family could have one, the king could have one, a village could have one, and basically whoever wears it and whoever's a part of that kind of spiritual community are responsible for keeping the traditions and the history of their ancestors. And so that's a big part of what these pieces are about. And a lot of it is in my work, but also kind of a lot of other kind of elements. So there's this phrase that became very kind of popular, like we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. So I was raised with that. And it wasn't something that was said, it was just something that my mother did and showed us. And so the Yoruba spirituality is very ingrained in who I am and how I approach my work. And yeah.
Yeah, you want to stop printmaking?
No, I mean, currently, I always like to say, printmaking is my current incarnation. And, it could always change. It has changed over the years. I've done sculptural pieces. I've painted. I've done like ceramics. But I like the printmaking for me, like everything that I've done, is I like working with my hands. I like the immediacy of like drawing something, you carve into something, and it starts to manifest and starts to appear. Usually I don't really sketch. I have done that in the past. Now, like, I draw directly on the linoleum itself or the wood itself. And certain things, like the smaller pieces, like certain things have certain references, but most of all that stuff is made up. All the patterns, designs, it's just, I sit, I draw, cowrie shells are actually, obviously cowrie shells. But like I've been doing excuse me, printmaking for about 21 years. I'm 51. It's a long time, so I kind of, it's just second nature. Like I can just sit, I can draw something, I can actually see it without really having to draw it. And then you have the other element, other level of the carving. So that adds another, so I don't have to get real detailed about certain things. And then, of course, just, I know how to draw, and just doing drawing, like, I understand, like, if I'm looking at the face, I'm looking at a face, it's like where is light hitting, where are shadows, like how you want to present that.
Okay. Thank you. Very informative. Let's go to Akwaaba. My work is right here. I'm gonna call her by the name. Joya and Noah Thompson. She's a local photographer. Tell us about you. Where are you from?
I'm born and raised in Newark, New Jersey. I just recently moved off of the block I've been living on my whole life, 49 years. Art has been a big part of me my whole life. My mother's responsible for that. My parents were progressive. My mother was the fuel behind that. So basically, from the moment she saw that I had an inclination towards drawing as well as science, every week my mother would go to Woolworths, Quarries, thrift stores, and would drop off sketchbooks, markers, crayons, and everything. So I've been drawing my whole life. Photography came to me again because of my mom. She was taking me to museums since I was the age of 5. I don't remember it, but I actually saw the Guernica piece from Picasso. I don't remember it, but that's the level that she used to. By the time I was 10, I knew every single museum in Manhattan. I think in the late 80s, 84-ish, 85, we went to the Studio Museum of Harlem. There was a retrospective on James Van Der Zee. I already knew about Gordon Parks, but James Van Der Zee was it. And again, she saw how I was all in, and she asked my uncle, who was very good at acquiring things and finding things, if he came across a camera, to let her know. So that's how I got my first camera. So because of income challenges, I really wasn't able to get into photography like I wanted. It wasn't until I went to an SFIA in '89, the North School of Fine Industrial Art. I started to dabble in photography more because there was a dark room. And then I went headfirst in it because I met Hilton Brathwaite, who at the time was teaching photography at all the Boys and Girls clubs in Newark. There was a photography program that Beeza Washington got a grant for. She was running the one in North Newark where the main darkroom was. So I would be in there doing stuff, I would be walking, we'd be going on trips, and then it really evolved from there. Even while I wasn't like a photo person, I was in illustration, but the teachers saw at a portfolio review, they saw how I had my portfolio for illustration and photography. Kevin Sampson was one of the people looking at my work, and they were like, "You obviously are a photographer." I'm like, "Well, how do you know that?" They were like, "Look at how you're presenting this as opposed to this. Like this is what you love." I went to Pratt for a year, where I also was head first in the dark room. I would get there at like 11 or 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and I would leave like around 12 a.m., 1 a.m., catch the train home. I used to sneak back into NSFIA after I graduated. I had my own business. So I would sneak back into the school like between when the day classes ended and the night classes would start, to use the lights and the backgrounds. And I did that for a little while. That was difficult. But as far as
office hours.
one of the teachers walked in, and that basically ended my business. We all used to sneak back into NSFIA and like have our businesses. So this work the house music work evolved. Okay, so I was in a little bit of a dark place. I had gotten out of house music. It wasn't my mainstay, but house music was a big part of me, starting with me when I was in high school in the 80s. So I got out of it, and then when the Sounds of the City concert started at NJPAC, what they used to have, which they don't have anymore, is they used to have between each set a 45-minute DJ set. And that reignited my love for house music that started 10, 15 years ago. And then I had a point and shoot. I started shooting the subjects. I'm also a big fan of Dwayne Michaels. Dwayne Michaels is a gay photographer who uses motion and light and slow shutter speeds to really paint the photography image. He uses his camera to paint the image. So I started doing that, and that was 10, 15 years ago. And this is the largest body of work that I have. I have a lot of pictures, but this is the most consistent, largest body of work I have. And it's for many reasons. It's innately Black. It's innately African. It's us at its purest form, because I have rules for myself. And what I also discovered through photography is that I'm capturing joy. If you try to Google Black joy, you ain't gonna find it. I have a close friend that died the same year that Jerry Gant died, Antoine Minter. His pictures are still online. Amazing. He said that the challenge of photographers, especially people of color, is to inject images that are not available and present in the world. And that's one of the things I'm trying to do with what I do, is to inject joy, for people to see what Black joy looks like, and to inject images into the psychological consciousness of the world of things that they're not used to seeing. So I'll kind of end it there because I could go on for years, but...
That was awesome. I've known Maria for years. She's incredible. Let's stay there with the logo. She's artist, stuff in the back, not the painting, but the screen back there. Will is our local artist. Tell us about yourself. Where are you from? What kind of work do you do?
So I was born in Newark, but I grew up in Dottown until I moved to East Orange when I was about 13 or 14. I still live right on that block since then. So art was introduced to me again, same way Angola was, pretty much my mom. I was lucky that she was from Brooklyn and really into all the cultures. If there was anything I wanted to do or see, I could walk past the ashram and be like, so what's that? And she'd be like, I don't know, go see what it is. I'll wait for you here. So it didn't matter what kind of religious building or whatever it was, she was always like, go investigate. Also, I was pretty lucky that my grandmother, so my mother moved to Jersey, thinking it would be safer for me. So as soon as I could get on the subway, I was like, out. Jersey was me, man. But my grandmother lived right next door to the Brooklyn Children's Museum. So that became my playground. If I wanted to go out, she knew I was safe. I was right next door to the Brooklyn Children's Museum. So that's just where I hung out. The other half of my family that moved from Brooklyn moved to Brielle. So I had the best of both worlds. I was living on the beach and I was living in the city. So that was really nice in terms of just growing up and being able to have a beach situation or be in the hood. It was just the best of both worlds. So also my mom put me into the Brooklyn Children's Museum. Not the Brooklyn Children's Museum. My first art classes were at the Montclair Art Museum when I was 7. So I started going to classes there. I was also really lucky to have a godfather who was gay and owned a wig shop on the corner of Tompkins Square Park on the Lower East Side. So, my life was very rainbow and very fun and like very, you know, non-judgmental, because even the whole gay thing, like I didn't even know that was a thing. My godfather had a partner who also happened to be white, who he had been with for like 30, 40 years or something. So until like 12, when the AIDS thing and the gay thing came out, I was kind of like, oh, that's what this is? Well, it's too late now. You know, I'm already in, you know. So, and they make the best cookies and have the best party. So, and he was a watercolorist. Also, he had a studio in his home. I actually just recently Googled him, and there was a blurb about him in Jet, which I thought was really cool. But, so I had really good encouragement there. Unfortunately, but fortunately, by the time I got to college or was going into college, I told my parents I wanted to be an artist because, like, what else was I going to be? And they were like, you're crazy. You're going to Howard. There's no way you're going to business school. They went through that whole thing. I was thinking to myself, but you groomed me from, like, young. And I don't get it. But anyway, so I went to Howard. And then I quietly changed schools and came home and told my parents when I got home that I had transferred colleges and wasn't going back to DC. And had enrolled in Montclair State, and at that time, and still do, they have a fantastic art program. But when I was there, all the teachers were from all over the place, including New York and all of that. So I really felt like I was at home because these were really quirky, wild teachers. One of my teachers I was doing fashion shows for at the Limelight. If you're old enough to know about the Limelight, I don't have to say anything else about that. So, you know, so that was cool. But then I wound, and I was doing modeling. And so while I was doing that, outside of her, like regular runway, the guy who was handling my accounting said to me, well, you're not Naomi Campbell, and I was like, clearly. So I had to find like more income, you know? And so, what I did was, besides working in showrooms, I wound up getting a job for Bob Blackburn. So I went to go work for Bob Blackburn, and I really kind of didn't know who he was because even though I changed my major and came home, my parents said, you think you're slick, you're going to be a graphic designer, because at least that sounded like a real job. Of course, when I graduated, everything was obsolete.
Let me stop you for a minute. Tell us about Bob first.
Oh yeah, so Bob.
Just real quick.
No. So anyway, so I go there, wind up going there to actually run the printmaking workshop. So that was really interesting. He was a very open kind of guy, almost to a fault. So for me, the challenge was making sure everybody wasn't just taking everything. Because he, you know, if you didn't have it, he'd be like, oh, just take it. Well, you can't really run an institution like that. But worked for me because I was also working there. So that's when I learned how to be a printmaker. And fell in line, you know, met the likes of Faith Ringgold and all these kind of people. Anyway, while I was there was a printmaker there named Desiree Alvarez, who's a fantastic printmaker and writer. She told me to meet Philip Pearlstein. I had no idea who Philip Pearlstein is. If you don't know who he is, he's one of the most prolific figure painters. He and Andy Warhol were best friends. They came to New York together, So anyway, I'm there working. She's like, oh, you should meet Philip. I meet Philip. Long story short, I wound up being a model for him for 17 years. And so they had impact on how I saw things be created, because Philip could make a blurb on the canvas and like in 10 minutes it was like a foot. I'm like, I don't understand how you do that. So I got to learn a lot from him. Plus, he was a historian beyond. I could not have paid for the education, and his collection and his home is beyond. So every week I went in there and I'd be like, was that there? Yes, let me tell you the history of this and that. So for 17 years, that's the kind of history I got in terms of art history. Working for Bob, I learned printmaking. With Philip, I learned more about inks and oils. But anyway, flash forward to the work.
Can I stop you real quick?
Yep.
This Bob, it's important.
Bob.
Was he the first African-American printmaker
That I met.
in New York City? He's on 42nd Street. I think
Yeah.
his studio.
Yeah.
He's very, very big.
Yes.
I mean, she did it very casual about it, but he's a very important printmaker in our history.
Yeah, Bob is, if you don't know who Bob Blackburn is, you should certainly look him up, and then look up all the people who did work there.
Yeah.
Because the
major
list
artists went through his studio.
Is amazing, and I cannot say enough what a pleasure it was to work for him. I think where I kind of pause, and I'll learn to stop doing that though when I'm talking about it, is that particularly with Philip and Bob, they were both very quiet, private people. And so it's like when you first meet them, you're all like, oh, you have the whole gloss of the superstar thing and wanting to talk about it. And then when you get to know them and they become your friends, that is not the same kind of way you look at it. And it becomes a more close kind of relationship. But you should most certainly look up Bob Blackburn. And yeah, he is very, very famous, and in terms of the Black community, one if not the most prolific Black printmakers. So it was a pleasure for me to get to work for him. So in me being in college and having to be a graphic designer, all my electives were like weaving, textiles, this and that. Anything I could get my hands on, kind of. It was only like one class or something. So eventually my work became very mixed media. It could have printmaking in it, it could have textiles in it, it could be just a wash or whatever. So these pieces here, in terms of the face, that's an ink wash, and then there's one that is down the hall that's 4 stripes, and it's called Soldier's Feathers. My family still live on the reservation. So the Shinnecock Reservation in Southampton. So I get a lot of my influence there. I do a lot of masks and things like that. And the one piece that's there that looks like a bunch of figures, I'm more interested in what you think it looks like, but there's a bunch of figures. And I did that for a friend of mine who was celebrating 25 years sober. And she wanted me to do an invite for her. So she was like, I want like 2 people dancing or whatever. So I did 2 stick figures. We're talking about it at lunch, and she snatched it. She was like, that's it. I'm like, hell, my brain is not ready to give it up. So I just went home, and then I wound up creating that piece, and that's how that got there. But I do everything from watercolor washes, mixed media. I'm a potter. I do design jewelry, and my jewelry right now is in House of Ave, which is Cortez's store on Main Street in East Orange.
What's the address?
What's the address?
What's the address?
359.
Just a shameful plug.
Yes, stand up.
359 Main Street, East Orange.
Yes, and so they now have my jewelry there, and I have other work that is in the Artisans Marketplace, which is next door to Urban Outfitters in Montclair on Park Street. I have 3 pieces there, which is about the study of flora and fauna, and it's all wire work, so it's complete.
Well, thank you for that. We almost there, we have 2 more artists that I'm excited about as well. Well, let's start with Moncho. Altamirano.
Altamirano. Yeah, my name is Walter Altamirano.
His work is at the end, black and white piece.
That's City Lights in the far right.
The young lady with the afro. Tell us about yourself. Where are you from?
So born in Chicago, grew in Southern California, then I relocated to Spokane, Washington for a few years, and then I moved to Manhattan in 2014. And yeah, so in terms of my art background, I started late. I was like in, I want to say my late 20s when I actually started. I started with watercolor sumie, and I got into that because of I studied Japanese, and I got into the art of it, and I was attracted to Japanese art, and I picked it up as a hobby, and I went to studying in Keiko, and she was just helping me with the watercolor. But that was like when I actually started like creating artwork. But when I reflected back on my life, I was realizing that art has been a part of my life since I was a child. And that, again, mothers are a big deal, you know, because of my mother, and she introduced the culture, art to me, and my heritage is, I'm Latino, so my father's from Ecuador, my mom's from Honduras, and one of the things that my mom told me is that never forget your roots, and she was referring to the indigenous background that I come from. And so when she introduced this to me, for us, unfortunately, a lot of our history has been kind of like wiped away from the colonists and the conquistadors, so all we have left is like our jewelry, our buildings, our architecture, our sculptures, and so from a young age, my mom was like making me familiar with all this stuff, you know? And so I think through that, and just through those experiences, I think that has obviously stayed with me, and my mom and my dad too, like they would collect art from local artists in Ecuador, so they have paintings, we have like woodworkings at home, and my mom would like antiques, and so it's just kind of like this cultural environment. You know, we love to dance salsa, we love to dance merengue, cumbia, you know, we listen to all the Latin artists, you know, we do the food, the cuisine, I mean, we sit down at the table, and it's just a big, beautiful household full of art. But I didn't actually start applying it until I was like late in 28. My early passion was soccer. I played soccer. And that was thanks to my father and my grandfather. So like my grandfather, on my father's side, from Ecuador, he was a professional soccer player. But he was also very artistic. He played multiple instruments. He had I remember being a child, and he had a saw. But he also built furniture and custom furniture. He had his own little workshop, and he built furniture for people and all kinds of stuff. But he grabbed the saw, and he sat me down, and he was like, and he started playing music on the saw, and I was just like, wow, okay. I didn't, I was like, I never knew you can do that, And so my grandfather had all these like talents, and there's, I have 10 uncles and aunts on that side of the family, and so I'm sure my grandfather had to learn how to keep that many children entertained, So he probably found anything that he could have made a sound. He was probably sitting there with the kids and stuff, and so anyways, I have a lot of beautiful experiences with him, and he's a big driving force behind like the arts and what I do, and when I look at my art and I create things, like he's always in the back of my head, and in my heart in terms of like creating things. I look up to him. When people ask me like, what artist do you look at, and who really inspires you, and it's like my grandfather. It's like my grandfather was really driving force. So and with soccer, I think it's with like the passion and the spatial awareness that you develop as a player, and the creativity that you have to develop as well as a player. I think that also extends into my artwork. So like, moving back forward again, when I was like in my late 20s, picking up this, the soumie and the watercolors, it was just, it was one of those things where I was just kind of just doing it just for the fact of just doing something different, exploring something. And luckily for me, Keiko, who was at that time, she was, looking at my work, she said, hey, do you draw? And I was like, no, not really. She's like, you're doing really nice stuff. I think you should think about drawing some more. I said, okay, I'm gonna look into that. I said, don't get upset if I find something and I don't come back. So I met a gentleman by the name of Joe Cronenberg. In Spokane, Washington, on the eastern side of the state of Washington. It's like 257,000 people there. 98% Caucasian, and there's not a whole lot of anything. There's like maybe one Cuban restaurant, maybe like 2 Mexican restaurants, 1 Korean barbecue restaurant. Like when it comes to diversity, it's kind of a little bit bland. And so when I met this guy, Joe Cronenberg, and had me do an exercise where you have to, I don't know if you remember the Brock plates, where those like the eyes, the nose, the ears, the heads, and stuff like that. I remember I walked into his workshop, and I told him, hey, I'm interested, and he's all right, sit down on this sheet. He's like, all I need you to do is copy these, and then he did this little scaffolding, and showed me what he wanted me to do, and just make sure you copy as many as you can. So at the end of the workshop, he came up and he's like, how you doing? And he looked, and he's like, oh, you did the whole thing. And I was like, yeah. He's like, looks really good. He's like, you don't draw it? I'm like, nope. He's like, you're more than welcome to stay. I was like, okay. So I stayed, So I stayed with him, and I stayed with him for like, I think it was like 3 months. And then I was at home, and I was trading currencies from home at that time. I had left the business that I was in with my business partner. I was on my own. I was trading from home. I had my monitors up, and I was dealing with the anxiety and the stresses that all these traders do on Wall Street. And so one of the things that I struggled with was staying up late at night, and I needed to find out a way to keep myself up and manage my trades. So I got this bright idea. I said, I'm going to rearrange my whole living room. I got this table, bought some canvas, bought some paint, and I said, I'm going to paint. And so I started painting that night, and I put my numbers in, and I started training. Next thing you know, it's like 7 in the morning. I was wide awake the entire time, managed everything, and I had a finished painting. And I was more proud about that painting than the trading. I could not believe that I was awake. I was like, oh my God, I'm wide awake. Time flew, it was like time didn't even exist, And I had this finished painting. So I gifted that painting to my mother. She has it at her house. It was called Transcendant. And at that moment, I realized, wow, there's something so powerful and so profound about this. And I wanted to continue exploring that. And I said, you know what, I'm going to continue. And as time progressed, trading went down, and painting kept going. And I just continued to paint, and continued to paint, and continued to paint. And when I eventually moved here to New York City, I had this really beautiful opportunity. And then I met my wife here. I ran the New York Marathon in 2013. That's when I met my wife, Dr. Florence. And we moved here, and she was like, you know what? She's like, continue pursuing it. So, like yourself, I went to Art Students League, and I registered for a life drawing class. So I was like, I really need to improve on this. And lo and behold, lucky for me, I was able to get instruction from a gentleman by the name of Michael Grimaldi, and I studied with him, and I went from trying to draw a kneecap on the leg. I remember he came, I was doing the whole envelope thing, and he'd come to me 3 or 4 times, like, hey, you can you can move on from the envelope. I was like, okay. You know? So everybody's like drawing these figures, and at the end of the drawing, I had like just the profile of a knee. And I was just like, yeah, and the guy next to me was like, oh, how'd you do? I was like, oh, you know, it's like, I just have the knee. He's like, man, that's a really good knee. You know? I was like, yeah, and he's like, yeah. 3 months into this class, I finished my first full figure. I had never drawn a figure in my life. Like 3 months, I drew a full figure. I have that frame and I have it at my house. So I was so proud of that accomplishment. It was something that I had never done before. So I had this full figure. And then from there, it just continued going. And I continued painting on the side because I'm an abstract painter. So all the artists that I studied with are all figurative. But on my own time, I love abstraction. That's what I love to do. And so I go home and I continue with my abstract work. In the meanwhile, I just continue studying there, and I've had opportunities to study with Dan Thompson, Peter Cox. You know, I've had opportunities to study with Frank O'Kane. He's an abstraction artist as well. And I've been blessed. Andrew Reese, these old timers, you know, from New York that have been around through the thick of it, you know, back in the heydays, and they're willing to want to give you all the knowledge in the world to help you advance yourself. And again, you know, wanting to pass on the tradition, wanting to pass on the history, wanting to pass on the knowledge. And I'm willing to take it anything. That's what I'm doing.
Now, you work with black and white, or this is the first piece?
So no, I mean,
Is this piece for the show?
yeah, I did make this piece for the show. So I love black and white. I mean, obviously, I told you I do figurative drawing, so I love black and white. I love charcoal. You know, I love Conte. I love graphite. And I love working in black and white paintings, but it's not something I often do. I usually, when you look at my paintings, they're very colorful. The range of colors that I use in my work is like, yeah, you guys will see. But I usually work with a lot of nice vibrant colors going on. But I think black and white is nice. When you look at the value scale, you got white on one end, black on the other end. When you're trying to communicate something to an audience that's wanting to look at your work, and trying to make something that someone can feel, someone can appreciate, and sense that there's some sort of life to it. I mean, black and white, when you don't have color, because color in itself, man, brings a lot of life to work. When you work in black and white, you're relying on other things, you know, to try to bring that life out. And so it was a really blessing that, you know, Laura had us do this black and white, because I got to go back to a place where I was just like, all right, man, I'm working in black and white again. It's nice, you know. So that city lights.
Great piece. And it's still for sale.
It is.
Thank you, Walter.
Thank you.
I called him Jerome last time.
I corrected him.
Yeah, thank you.
And corrected him.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I know your work is around the block. Behind the desk, behind, what was that?
Yeah, close to the, when you come in, it's on that wall, first two pieces.
Yeah. Tell us about you and, tell us about Manna.
Oh,
That's something that we didn't hear last
yeah.
time.
So I'm Brian Small, B-R-Y-A-N-T, Small, no S, not Biggie Smalls, Small, like little. That's how I have to describe it. Brian Park, Brian Gumble, Brian Small. I am an alcohol ink artist, work in abstract. Alcohol ink, high pigmented dye, activated by 91% rubbing alcohol, meaning when I'm painting, I don't know what's gonna happen. It's pretty unpredictable, similar to watercolor, except it smells really bad because it's rubbing alcohol. Often I'm asked about, can you paint with like tequila or vodka? I tried, it does not work. It's not a high enough proof. It'll just kind of like settle the ink and kind of make it move around, but it won't like activate it and cause it to bloom and blossom. In short, if I draw a straight line with 91% rubbing alcohol, that straight line will open up and start to kind of move around. Whereas in watercolor, the same thing with the fluid, it just causes the watercolor to move around. Same thing with alcohol ink. Currently, I'm doing a residency at Manna Contemporary in Jersey City. I don't know why I almost said Washington, D.C. I'm originally from D.C., but I've been doing the residency since January, and
I was just saying to them earlier that I feel like this light has been lit under me. That's just like, the art is just kind of pouring out of me. I was supposed to, in the proposal, complete 14 paintings, and I'm like 22 in. And I imagine by the end of the time, I'm probably gonna be like 30 in. But when it comes, and you just kind of go with it. But the residency is with the Eileen Kaminsky Foundation, and they do, for all artists here, they have a residency program that will give you studio space for 3 months at Manor Contemporary, $1,000 stipend, where you're able to have 24-hour access, studio space, money to create, and you come up with a collection of work, whatever you decide to do. They keep 2 of those pieces, one to go directly to the foundation, and one where that one of those pieces go for auction to raise money for the foundation. And it's been amazing. Your work is seen by a number of curators and press people, and a couple weeks ago, like Whoopi Goldberg just walked down the hall, and it's like, Whoopi Goldberg. It's like, huh. So it's just been kind of crazy, this whirlwind experience of people seeing the work that you like.
I got it. Go ahead.
Pregnant pause.
Away from the table.
You okay first?
Okay?
Yeah.
You all right?
Opinion's fine. You first.
Save the art.
So,
Here's Puerto Cortez.
Kind of the best.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it.
Tell us about black and white ink. I mean, I know you work in colors.
So, yeah, I am all color and sparkle, and in spite of me always wearing black. So to do a black and white show is a little tough for me because I'm all driven by color and my pieces are motivated by color. So the idea of, in my collection, in my work, I think I have maybe I have a collection of probably 500 pieces. There are probably 6 pieces total, all in, that are just black and white. Because it's really difficult for me to kind of rein it in and control myself from adding color in. I cannot help it. It's just what I do. So to be able to have 2 pieces in the show that are literally black and white, the piece reveal looks like that there are more colors in there, but it's only black ink. What happens with the alcohol ink, what it does is it starts to separate the inks, the pigments of the inks, and it brings about these blues and the pinks, and sometimes yellows and oranges that are making up the black dyes. The pigments in the ink start to come out when I'm adding the alcohol to it. So it makes it look like there are additional colors in there, but it's only black ink that's in there. So I'm able to cheat a little bit.
Well, that's
But
something
it's
you
black
learned.
ink.
Did you learn that then when you created the piece?
Well, no, I mean, there are certain things that I know will happen with the inks. Like over time, my job is to master those inks. So there are certain things that I kind of learned over time, like, okay, if I add too much alcohol, it's gonna turn green. So with mixing different, and there are different brands of black ink, so I know with these different tones and different brands, if I put them in there the right way, I'll get different levels of ink and different shades, and they'll break down and give me different tones. So I'm able to get light blacks and some darker and mid-level blacks, but it's still black and white. So I'm able to get some tones in there and get my color without, breaking the rules too much. Because I'm a rule breaker. That's kind of, I always say as artists, we're superheroes. We can do anything. So That's just kind of how I go about art, that's how I think about art. The head doesn't have to be there because there's a rule. We put the head where we want it to be. We break the line, we color outside the lines, we do what we want to do. And that's just kind of, that's how I move around everything, period. So it's kind of, it was difficult for me to stay quiet while everyone else is talking.
But you did.
Well, I did it. So,
Well, thank you.
thank you.
We have time for some questions for the audience. Let's direct the questions to the audience. Last time we had a conversation with the audience, and we didn't get a chance to talk to the audience. Anyone?
Do not be
No.
afraid.
Laura, you have a question?
Not really, actually. One question. How difficult was it to work in black and white for the artists who produced pieces specifically for the show?
So, I find that black and white, so with my color pieces, I look at color as, when I do color pieces, I look at colors and shapes that can form an image, right? So it's a little forgiving, because the way I print, I do a technique that's called color reduction. Basically, if that piece back there or whatever, was color, you work from the lightest color to the darkest color. And instead of having, and say there was going to be 9 colors in the piece, instead of having different color separations for each color, you just use one piece of linoleum. So meaning, I have to plan out what the addition is. So there are going to be 30 of those images, so I know 30. So I print, say the first color is yellow, I print all 30 yellows, right? I decide where the yellow is going to stay, and on the piece of linoleum, I carve into that areas where I know the yellow is going to stay, then I print my next color, and it's a little complicated, but I print my next color on top of that 20 times. So what I'm doing is I'm revealing the previous color each time, and then the linoleum gets reduced to nothing. I can't use it anymore. So for me, that's easy, even though it sounds complex, because you can kind of get away with certain things. It's forgiving, right, to create. The black and white, like once you do it, once I cut into it, it's gone. Right, there's no filling in, there's no, and you got, like, to your point, you gotta look at black and white also like you look at color. You have the extreme of white and black and everything in between. And so, especially with the work in printmaking that I do, there's no gray. There's the illusion of gray, and that depends on how I cut. So if you cut further away or close together, you kind of, get an illusion of gray. But I find black and white a lot different, more different.
Anyone else want to answer Joe's question?
Oh, I was gonna talk about black and white. So this wasn't too tough because typically my portraits stay in black and white, but what was hard was taking away the background. I usually do a black and white figure sometimes when I do a figure of human in the painting. And so I have a couple that I've done like that of, people, but I fill the background with color because I think that I started to feel like I was working in the foreground and then the background was, I was just like, whatever, who cares? And so I started to enjoy filling the background with like florals and like meaning and stuff like that. So when I decided to do a black and white figure in this one, it was like, oh my gosh, it's going in the background. I can't like explode it with color, which is what I usually like to do. So in this case, I think it wasn't necessarily difficult. It was just like, okay, so without the background or without flowers and leaves in color, because those don't really, to me, have the same impact in black and white, where are you going to push yourself next? My black and white pieces that I did initially were really simplistic. The two that I did that I would have considered for this show initially, one was a black and white, a really simplified painting of Colin Kaepernick kneeling, and I did it, before he was out of the NFL, and it was, I hung it up in like a 2017 New York Arts Festival show where most of my work was focused in color oils on immigrant women, and that was cool because I like the high contrast, but of black and white. So there's some strength when you take away the color too, because now it's like whatever you put on there is going to be really impactful, right? So now it was like, how do you play with that high contrast and see, if you take away the flowers and the leaves, what can you show, for me, flowers and leaves, what are you gonna show, what are you gonna do now that you have this open space to create more impact, basically, with contrast of black and white? And which areas are gonna stay gray and why? Yeah.
So, kind of following up on that, to what degree does light and sound and setting impact the black and white? Is it, because
I don't know what you meant by sound now that you finished your
I know what she
statement.
meant. I know exactly what she meant.
all kinds of things, all some people, it works, some people maybe not.
I don't work without, I cannot work without sound.
There you go.
I would just be standing there. And thankfully enough, my mom was really into all kinds of music, and then I had 5 uncles that played upright bass jazz. So, my house was always filled with music, and particularly African music, people like Olatunji and all these other kind of people. What's the women's group that you know? Your mother made, my grandmother's made us go see that.
Oh, yeah, one of them does the sign language.
Rock.
Oh, Sweet Honey on the Rock.
Sweet Honey. And I love them, but woo. So Sweet Honey Rock, but I grew up with that kind of, but any music, Hispanic, any kind of Latin jazz, all of that. I love Tito Puente. I have a piece that I didn't bring in that was black and white that was called Puente y Yo, just for the simple fact that I was listening to him when I was doing it. But I know for me, I can't listen, I can't work without music.
I have to have music. But for me, I have to listen to upbeat dance, house, party music. No matter what the subject matter is, I paint from a happy place. I think we talked about this last time, but I paint from a happy place. So even though the tone of these are black and white and they are darker in nature, because I'm always painting from a happy place, that has nothing to do with the color palette at all, the energy of my work. I hope that people feel something positive from it, because that's where it's coming from. So the subject matter doesn't matter, really. It really is about the music. I'm dancing and having a good time. I may be FaceTiming with my mom. We may be painting at the same time, but we're dancing and partying and having a good time. If it's quiet, I literally can't. It doesn't feel, it's almost, it's part of a ritual, is turning on the music.
It's kind of a
It's
compliment.
like, yeah, it's like you have to get in the zone, and part of that is turning on the music. If the music isn't on, it's like, oh wait, it's not paint time yet.
In terms of my photography, the images are originally color, and I changed them to black and white for the show, which take on a very photojournalistic quality. But in terms of the other things that you mentioned, the music fuels the art. For this body of work, I am participant and I am witness at the same time. Part of the reason, not for me, part of the reason why this group of work is strong is because I've been doing it for so long. And all these are people, a lot of these people are people that I see all the time, and they see me all the time. And sometimes I can't take photos while I'm doing this. Sometimes I have to put the camera down because I'm participating. And then when I'm done participating, then it's time for me to document and witness. I am like a hunter with this. I am like I don't know what like a tiger or something. I don't know. It's like I have to go back and forth with it, and it's the music that it's all behind this. If it wasn't for the music, it wouldn't exist. It's a life force.
I was gonna answer the lighting part. You're asking about black and white, and I like that you asked it because it makes me focus on a little bit of detail in my work. When you paint in black and white, you have the option of either buying black paint and basically using the black paint in the tube where you can mix it. you can make your own. And I like making my own, just because you can create slight differences in the shades of black. And you don't necessarily see it from standing away from it, but if you look at the light and look at how the light is hitting the canvas, you'll see different colors of black, which creates a subtle movement in the work. And you can only appreciate that when you really look and you study a painting. Because initially when you look at it, automatically your brain registers a black and white. But you have to give yourself a little bit of time to really see how light plays on black. And black plays with light really nice. That's the thing that's nice about black, is that black absorbs light and it will take a really nice, so you can see it in this painting.
Yeah.
So yeah, and in regards to sound, music, like I know everybody's like, music is a big deal. I've made paintings based off of stuff, other things called Thriller, Michael Jackson, listening to Thriller, and I made it. And there's also like, with sound too, there's something where I don't put music. And there is a sound. People call it silence, but there's a sound going on. And then sometimes in those moments, sometimes it becomes a little bit more meditative for me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
We have time for one more question, I think. She
Yes.
was first, so sorry.
It's very short, actually. You were talking about you modify, you changed your originals, right? For this, accommodating for this show. I was wondering, are these electronic assets you have, or these are the original, what's it called? The black and the proof,
No, so I'm pretty much all
the
digital.
negatives, yeah.
I'm pretty much all digital.
So this is digital, okay.
This is all digital, and that's why it's like the disposition towards science and technology that my mother saw, it applies to the work, because now I can do everything with a high turnover. I edit on my phone.
I see.
I upgraded my equipment, which really helps with the witness participant part, because I can be there, take pictures, edit, upload, which I did, which I started doing last year. But I started in black and white film.
And you have the negative of all those.
I still have the negatives of all my early work.
Great, thank you.
Well, thank you. I want to thank the audience for coming. Close out this session with a few words.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Palmer. I'm the gallery owner, along with my husband Ray, who's not here. He's probably going to be by in a little while. I just want to say thank you to the group the first group who's talking. We have another group coming up. But I just want to say thank you guys for being a part of the show, for celebrating our anniversary with us, and being a part of the Akwaaba family. On March 28th, we're going to have our first all-female lineup. And Marissa is going to be part of that show. And we're going to call up the next group.
Class dismissed. Thank you.
Hello, how are you? Thank you. I'm blessed. Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to say hi. Thank you.
I took a lot of pictures.
Hey, man, that's cool.
No, they're not here. I have them. I didn't, the set that she was in, I didn't send them. But here she is. Her friends are still here, like, always there. Thank you for coming out. Let me turn this off.
We're going to start our artist talk with, let's start with John. John is a photographer. When you first walk into your left, tell us about you, John, and your practice.
I was born in Newark, lived here through high school, And around when the pictures were made, I was going back and forth between the East Village and Newark. Eventually shifted to New York, but always maintained some kind of connection to Newark. About the time when I was 15, by the time I was about 15, I began to gravitate to New York, there was a store on Halsey Street called World Tide Candy Crafts where you could buy the Village Voice, which was this gateway to all this strange stuff going on in New York. Particularly important to me was what was experimental film, I called that the time underground film, and I got really interested in images, and I got interested in how to put images together. Very different from the work I have here, which are all individual photographs. But I was waiting, at the time I was making these, I was studying photography. I have very little formal training, but I took a workshop, a master workshop was at Modell. Judging from the negatives of these pictures, I should have been taking a technical course instead, but and then the photojournalist Ken Heyman saw some of my pictures. I was sitting across from him and he said, "Who are you?" Gave me a camera, told me to take his workshop, and those were the two really formal art education I had, except for I did go to NYU for cinema studies, thinking I would become a film critic. Later, I went back in philosophy and ended up spending many years teaching philosophy at Queens College and other institutions. So my practice, I've been a photographer of the city. Here in the photographs we have here, I'm just wandering about on my home turf. You can trace the little pathways from north to north through different ways of getting to downtown, getting to places important downtown like the library, the basement of Klein's, which had a really good discount record store. Bought my first Rolling Monk album. Bought Ornette Coleman's Free Jazz, which I listened to obsessively on this mass of instruments on a little portable record player, so it became just a mess of sound, trying to figure out what held this together. And again, music, and particularly improvised music, along with film, are essential to me as photography. Again, for film, what happens when you put two images together? So for a long time, I was very much interested in, again, at a period that started just after these photographs. I was very much interested in flicker films. Put films together, pop, 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 with black in the middle, and see what happens. Didn't work out because you needed to, people who worked like that worked from school. I had no interest, I was interested in, as I do now, just collecting material and figuring out from the bottom up, from the material, how to structure it.
Tell us about the subject.
Okay, the subject here is Newark. Again, as I do now, now when I go out to a place, I wander around always without a guidebook, without, from Paris, Venice, archives, I can do everything I leave. I wander around the city without guidebook, without map, without preconception, and just shoot a lot. Here I'm wandering around my home turf. Basically, North Newark, down into downtown. There's another section of ground here, Broad and Market. Basically, one afternoon in Broad and Market.
The subject for the series was the African American.
No, there was no subject. It was just wandering about.
You picked these
And
pieces from.
this is my neighborhood. And, areas that I just walked around in. An important thing about these was cameras weren't very seen. People didn't walk around with cameras. So kids would come up to me and say, "Hey, mister, take my picture." And that's very important for these pictures because a lot, especially the kids, a lot of them are about, you know, the kid, I very carefully then position them, and then the kids have to decide, well, how are they going to present themselves? Wouldn't work now because kids have a selfie face from 3 years old. But a lot of this picture, you can see, particularly there's a picture of a kid with a little terrarium. You can see him thinking, how am I going to, okay, I got myself into this situation, how am I going to present myself? And was fascinated by this. Obviously, I mean, again, this is 40 years ago, so who knows what I was thinking. But the choices I made then are pretty much the choices I make now. So I guess there is this fascination of these transitional states, this people thinking rather than people coming to a pose.
I've seen a lot of your work in black and white.
Yeah, there's no black and white, it just after these.
So, I haven't seen any color in your work. Do you work in color at all?
Now I work, since '74, it's been all color. And colors, I'm from, after I realized I couldn't do it in film, I started to work with the photographing for and doing other things for the performance artist, filmmaker Jack Smith, who was very influential person in avant-garde art. And I realized he was doing slideshows, and I realized I could move slides around, and so I did slideshows. Yeah, these are really just wandering about Newark, same way I wander around a lot of cities.
Great, thank you. Just FYI, John has a studio at Project Friendly Space, which is 800?
800 Broadway.
Broad Street, here in Newark. If you want to go visit him, you have to call him.
Yeah, okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. Steve Green, one of my favorite artists. We go way back.
Way back.
I think, yes, Steve, two pieces are against the wall.
Yeah.
Tell us about black and white experience, because I know your work is colorful as well.
Yeah.
Is that difficult for you?
No, it wasn't difficult because, I mean, I started out as a graffiti artist, so black and white is, it just comes naturally because you're working with artists, you lay down your outlines and then you put color. So I'm used to working in black and white. These two pieces right here, I'll talk about this piece right here. This is actually a full print. And what I did was, you know, normally when I go to the art store, I walk down every aisle. Drives my children crazy. So I pick up things, and it's often things that I don't need. So I saw these foam sheets, and they were cheap. So I picked up a few, and they were sitting in my studio for months and months and months and months. And then I saw a video on YouTube about vinyl cuts, and I was just got to thinking. I was like, maybe I could use these foam sheets to make a print. So I took an X-Acto knife, I took a photo, kind of, you know, stripped the photo down to its bare black and white spaces, and I cut out the shapes. I glued the foam pieces, the foam cut out to a foam board, and I rolled some ink on it. Well, not ink, but some house paint. And I put out a piece of paper over it, and I liked how it came out. And so I did a series of about 15 of these, and then I did a couple other series. This is something I did back in, I think the date is 2000. Oh, I can't see. 2013. 2013. So that was sitting in a crate for years, in a little plastic bucket. So when the show came up, I remember I did that. I said, hey, I could use that. You know? This piece over here is a very direct drawing. And it's funny when the other artists were talking about music and how they work with music. I can't work with music. I just absolutely can't because I'm pretty much crying when I'm working. And if there's anything competing with that, it'll just drive me crazy. So
That's a very direct drawing, and what I mean by that is there was no planning to it. I just started with the line, and I just started connecting the lines, and I was hoping that it would all come out, and it did. It worked out. So that was just a man frame. The name of that piece is called Just Asking. So usually when I'm working, I'm in a prayerful state of mind, and that's how my work is informed in terms of image and content. But
You're from Newark, correct?
I'm not from Newark. I was born in East Orange in 1969. My father and mother moved to Scotch Plains, grew up in Scotch Plains, and I was blessed to have a lot of, exposure to art through the school system and everything, but it was mostly through my brother, because he was an awesome artist. He was just very, very before his time, I would say. And he went to the Newark School of Fine Industrial Art. And I believe it was, I don't remember the year, but I was in 9th grade. He came back with these books with graffiti in it. And I was like, wow, you got to teach me how to do this, And that's pretty much when I decided I wanted to be an artist. Since the 9th grade, I was like, this is what I'm going to do. We had our own crew. We were doing buildings, we were tagging, we were doing all that stuff, And when it came time for me to graduate in 1987, I decided I was going to go to Art Institute of Philadelphia. And I got got exposed to a whole new array of different genres of art. And, I decided that I wanted to go into advertising and graphic design because I felt that that's where the money was. And I got out. I was making good money at the time. You could, take your book to New York and you can, this was like 1989. You can walk into an ad agency, there would be 25 artists on doing pay stuff and cutting everything out by knives, doing everything by hand. A few years after that, computer came out, wiped all those artists out. So, we had to remake ourselves. So at that point, I started getting more into illustration because that was my first love anyway. But I was blessed to get illustration work that kept me busy. And I believe I met Curtis. I met Curtis because I think it was like around 1995 or so. I was working for this newspaper in Coast City News, and we had late hours. And I was doing spot illustrations for them as well as, layout and so forth. And I came home, it must have been like 2 o'clock in the morning. I was dead tired. We were working all day. I was just sitting in my car. And I said, okay, I'm going to get up and go to bed. So I walked across the street, got in bed, and this car came around the corner and jumped the curb and destroyed my car. And I was heartbroken. 2 weeks after that, my apartment went up in flames, lost everything I ever did since I was little. So Plainfield had this art festival. It was really big at the time. The Plainfield Art Festival. I don't know if they do it anymore, but that was pretty big. And I said, this year I'm going to be in it. And that's when I met Curtis. And he, I had like 6 paintings, one of them which survived the fire. There was one that my sister had, and I created 3 more for it. So I had my paintings on the grass. And he walks over, he was like, yeah, I really like your work, I'm really feeling that, He said, you should come to Newark. And I came out, he was doing these things at African Grove Theater. And it was like, that was before its time because there was nothing happening in Newark in terms of galleries and so forth, except for African Grove Theater. And they were doing these art shows and poetry events. And that's how I got introduced to our scene. And slowly but surely after that, I started leaning more towards fine art. And that's what I do today.
Now, how long have you been in Newark?
I moved to Newark in 1998. And I moved to Newark because of ministry. I started, after my daughter was born, we were looking for a church, but I guess we never found a church. And I get a phone call, and I meet my bishop over the phone, and he prayed for me, and that prayer just changed the trajectory of my life. I'm a minister now, so everything I do is informed by my relationship with Yahweh, the Heavenly Father. And it seemed like after that point in my life, it's just like all the change that I was ever looking for as an artist started to happen. I also know Cortez too, because Cortez is from Scotch Plains. So, he remembers like those years when hip hop really informed us and really shaped our lives, because that's where it really all started.
Just, you have murals in what, correct? How many do you have?
I don't know how many, it's quite a few. It's quite a few.
10?
It's probably over 10, because I have quite a few murals in the schools.
Okay.
Yeah. So I average about maybe 2 or 3 murals a year, and I've been doing murals since like 2011.
You think you're known more and known for your murals, or you just?
I'm probably known more for my murals, yeah.
Well, thank you, Steve.
Let's say artists all my life. Graffiti, of course, graduated from Arts High School. Before going to Arts High School, I had to, of course, get accepted to art. It wasn't until like when I was in middle school, I went to a private school in East Orange, which is out there also. Somehow, my parents sent me there because they didn't want me to go to East Orange Mill at the time. But I didn't realize for 3 years I was there, we had no art. 3 years, I had no art education going through school, but I knew I wanted to go to Arts High School, so I had to make my portfolio, come up with something for my portfolio on my own, because I didn't have art direct. Connection was everything through there. Then graduated from after Arts High School, graduated from William Patterson. William Patterson, we studied art there. First actually studied African American Studies, and then got a degree in that, and after that, to study as far as studio art. In my 20 years art educator, I teach, I love to teach as far as art, teach AD studio art at Columbia High School. It's just a love for the art. Starting in my early days of being a graffiti artist, that's how I learned color. Just dabbing and reading as far as a lot of work. Some dramatic shows that we've seen been introduced from a lot of different artists, a lot of different galleries. We've been blessed to be around so many different people, and it just kind of really helped how we translated and started looking at the work itself, exposure, shows, having just opportunities, learning a lot as far as, I always felt as an artist, I know this is my calling. In middle school or elementary school, I was that kid that knew that why is art only at 30 minutes and English 45 minutes, 60 minutes? What was the problem with that? Or just wanting more, always wanting more to be able to, express myself. So, I always knew that to be an artist, you have to have a voice. And I know I have a voice that I want to be heard, as far as, and if I felt that it was a way for me to share my work and leave something behind when I leave this place, that the work can still be here. So I knew my early times growing up, my favorite sitcom was Good Times. So seeing as far as JJ, which later I learned as far as more education, that he was just a character, so he didn't create the paintings, but it was for Ernie Barnes, but I knew that that would be me having an easel in my living room somewhere painting and creating work, which I always did. Was able to do as an artist. So that always continued to get inspired me, just being able to create. My dad, I come from a family of artists in my family, father, musician, he played the saxophone. But just to be able to see and listen to a lot of things that he also used to tell me is to never waste time, to master your time. Time is precious. Time was always
put into my mind because he was so militant. So, they get up early morning and do a lot of things. So, by me being an artist, I can look around and see my studio and see the work that I create. I said, okay, well, I must not be wasting time because time is going into all these paintings. And it's like frozen time, whatever you create. And I must be mastering my time and using my time wisely because I'm documenting all this work that I'm creating. And the work just started just dwelling and dwelling and duplicating so many times. It's like, wow, I must be onto something. But just as an art educator, I love to be able to share things the knowledge that I get. And whatever I learn, to be able to pass on, to be able to show I have a range of students that I work with, from teaching drawing, art 1, art 2, to my AP studio art teaching students. So the range is so broad, to be able to work with someone that have no ability to draw and to be able to give them the confidence to ability to teach them, have that aha moment, that light bulb moment is important to me. But then I also like to love to nurture the ones that really have that gift, that talent on that highest level and see how they can really just take it back. So
do you show that in your work? That kind of passion
for myself or for them?
For them.
Oh yeah. Sometimes they see me work live, as far as how the work is developed. That's the good thing about when you're teaching, or if students are in the studio or they see you in the classroom. A lot of times most people don't see the work until it's a final project. But when you see it in projection and how it's actually being created in steps, you see the process. And you see the painstaking and sometimes the mistakes and that's all about the experience. So that's important. And to pick up from somebody's question about music is a part of it. So I have to play music when I work music as well. But it all depends on what's the mood, what's the genre as I work. So if I'm painting, doing figurative dance pieces, I may have some other music on, either house music or I'm doing really spiritual pieces, then I might have maybe some gospel or something. So a lot of people, I love jazz. So I'm playing a lot of different music at different times.
I know you guys are two big artists. Tell us about this abstract.
Well, it's not really a jump. I have been doing abstract as well, just people haven't been seeing. I had an opportunity to do some before for this show. Black and white was more of a challenge because I love color. Like I was saying, it's very hard for me to start off with a black and white piece and just keep it black and white. Color is somehow just going to come out. The two pieces that are on the back wall, these are some abstract. I use a lot of collage, a lot of fabrics when I work, so I wanted to share a lot of patterns that I'm using, a lot of movement. I'm showing a lot of controlled energy that's being trapped into the actual canvas itself, but it's showing a continuous flow of energy that's constantly flowing and moving back through. The difference as far as what I'm working from my figures now, my thing is, it's still an inward expression of myself. My thing is, I want to be known as an artist. I don't want to be known as someone that's being categorized and put into a box and say, oh, he's a creative artist, or he only does landscapes, or he only does sculpture. I can do whatever. I probably do printmaking as well. Sometimes I do sculpture. I haven't played around that much with photographs. But I can work with any medium, so I just want to be known as an artist. And and that's just expanding as far as over time. How I'm telling my story. If it's documented, maybe this could be my Picasso blues period, where this is my abstract period, where this is where I'm just on this flow, because it's a study body of work. So now I'm always consistent on building a series of my work. So, Steve and us, we would always talk about when we're creating work, I can never be bored because I have so many different series that's going on. I have my jazz series, I have my dance series, I have my family or urban image, from me. Now I'm doing my whole abstract. So I have different things that I can constantly keep creating always. I can never be bored. It's always a non-stop, series of life work.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Go back to them when you have questions. When you first walk in, the first painting to your left is a beautiful piece with men who are tender, angry, anything. Artist is red. Red. R-E-D. Tell us about you. Okay, where you from? Tell us about your art background.
Okay, so
And then that piece.
I can read it back. Yeah. So I'm like a military child. So I moved around a lot when I was younger. I spent the majority of my life in Newark. I wasn't born in Newark. I started doing art, I guess, since like kindergarten. I went to Sussex Ave. And I remember drawing like people, and I would draw their hands. The hand would just be a circle. I couldn't draw a hand. And that's probably the earliest memory I have as far as like art. I think I got more into it in like MySpace days. I would like see somebody I like on MySpace, draw their profile, draw the picture, and like that's where I got my inspiration from. Like I would just draw random women I seen on MySpace that I was following, or she went to another high school or whatever it was. Like that was like my thing, but I didn't really take it seriously. And these would all be like, I would just have like a ball pen, like a blue pen, a black pen, no color, no paint, sometimes pencils. And then Facebook came out, I did the same thing. So like, as the social media platforms came out, I just like doing more of those. As far as like art class in high school, I didn't take that class seriously at all. Like, I enjoyed some of the projects, but I realized like the type of art I wanted to do, I didn't really want to do all areas of art. Like, we had to make boxes, which is like scale models of like a room. I didn't enjoy that. And I remember my cousin was in my class. I remember one day we was giving the art teacher a hard time. Like we, I don't know how, I made like a basketball hoop, like put it on the board, and we was like shooting paper balls. And like, we didn't really, it wasn't like enriching for me at that time. And then when I went to college again, now Instagram came out. I'm drawing people I see on Instagram and stuff like that. And a lot of my inspiration came through like interacting with social media and being infatuated by certain pictures or angles that people would take, and I'd be like, yo, I gotta draw. And some people would ask me like, when you gonna draw me? When am I next? It's not something I'm choosing. It's a compulsion. It's like I might see the picture and I feel compelled to do it. It's not something like, oh, I want to draw such and such today. At least not at that time. And then when I got to college, I feel like that's when I first started painting in like 2013. So prior to that, I did like marker drawings. I would draw just a pen on like paper with lines on it, or like I would get like printed paper and just do what I could with that. But when I went to college, I volunteered in Atlanta for like alternative spring break. And we went to like an elementary school, and they wanted us to paint ceiling tiles for like a classroom. So when the kids in the class they looked up, there's like something on the ceiling. And when I did that, I did like a galaxy design. And it was real simple. It was just like blues, purples, and like, you know, white dots for stars. But it's a ceiling tile, so it has like a texture to it. So I ain't had to use no white. I just put the colors on it, and it already had like holes in it. And it just came out nice, and people really, I think the feedback I got from that was like intoxicating. They like gassed me up, and yeah, like it felt good. Like if you get, I'm a fire sign, so if you gas me up, like that's like you're feeding into my passion, so it made me want to do it more. And then when I went back to school after the trip was over, I just went to like the janitor and was like, "You got ceiling tiles?" Because literally they would throw them away. Like they get a little ashy, or they get a little. Sometimes they get brown spots on them or whatever, they'll throw them away, like they don't mean nothing. So I was getting them for free. And I was painting ceiling tiles. I was a resident assistant, so I would like sell them for $30 to my residents. Like, oh, you want this? Oh, I bet. Boom. And so I still have most of them. I mean, and then when I came home, in college, I think I just was like, because I had played basketball since like 5th grade, like on an actual team. Prior to that, I played like around, but 5th grade, my uncle right here, he started taking me to, I don't know if y'all ever heard of Pass. We used to play right here on South One Jab at St. Rocco, well, it used to be St. Rocco's, in their gym, and it was like a league in North. And so I started hooping, but like, I realized if I took the same effort and energy I was putting into training for basketball and I applied that to art, I had a question like, where would it go? But like in school, I'm low-key a nerd, so like I enjoy school, I'm good at school. And at a certain point in college, I had to switch like a while. Instead of, because in high school it's easy, like you don't gotta study, you don't really gotta listen, you just do what you do. In college, like the level went up and I had to like sleep in the library, like be in the library all day, every day, whatever the case is. And I was like, if I take that same approach and I put it on the art, like where would it go? And that's when like I came home, I gotta find a way to make income or like to live life. And I was like, I'm gonna go full-fledged in art, like I'm gonna figure this out. However I gotta do it, like, and that's what kind of got me here today. Like just, I'm probably 7 years in, just taking it seriously. Like that's the only difference. Nah, well, in college I double majored in philosophy and psychology. So art was like on the side, like I didn't really tell people I drew. Like you would know if you followed me, but other than that, I wasn't like going out like, oh, I'm an artist or nothing like that. I was into philosophy. Like I argue you down. Like that was my way. But the piece at the front is called Indomitable Messiah. And I was really inspired by just growing up in York. And I grew up on a number block. And my experience there, like every day I went to school, I would see people on the corner. In the morning time, when I get off of school, same people, same corner. When it's raining, it's snowing, it's sunny. It's like no matter what it was, and some people look at it like it's bad. What I took from that was like work ethic, and I really admired the work ethic. Like y'all just got the cops just burned down on y'all yesterday. Y'all right back at the same spot. Whatever the case is, no matter what it was like a commitment to like this space. It was like a sense of ownership on it. Even though like if you're not from that neighborhood, you know it's gonna feel tense walking through that crowd to go to the store. Like you're gonna feel a certain sense of pressure because they put pressure on whatever variables is in that environment. But I think as I got detached from it, like when I went to school, I had enough distance away from it to reflect on it and see it in a different light. Like in the midst of going through it, like living in the hood, you can't really appreciate it as much because you're in it. And it's like, nah, I don't want to walk through all these. I gotta deal with all these different things. I think when I went to college and I really had a chance to like analyze that experience, it's like it's beauty in it. And if you had the rhetoric to really reframe that narrative, you would see that it's dope. But since when you like in the midst of it, you don't have the narrative to really appreciate what's going on in front of you. Like you take it for granted.
That's where you're at right now as far as your art, your direction. Which you talk about those inner city issues.
Not necessarily. I feel like I'm just being my authentic self, and this is my experience. So I feel like a lot of black boys deal with growing up. You kind of straddle on the fence whether you want to or not. You want to be in the streets or you don't. And growing up in New York specifically, it's a lot of things that's available to you that you have to make a decision. Like, how am I gonna feed into this? Am I not? On Monday I might, on Tuesday I might not. On Wednesday I might, on Thursday I might not. And it's a lot of cognitive dissonance that goes on because when you look around, the people that have most of the resources in the neighborhood is in that lifestyle. And then when you say like, I wanna be an artist, like look around, who do you see? So I mean, that's why I appreciate spaces like this because I get to see other artists, other black artists. Like outside of that, growing up, you didn't see too much of that. All you see is rappers and everybody want to be famous at a young age and get a Bentley and all of this. Like it was glamorized, like the street life was glamorized. But then again, me being detached, going to college, analyzing like the role that media plays in our psychology and like Jim Crow and how, you know, we used to infuse music with like ways to liberate ourselves. Like Negro spirituals came before rap, but then rap was positive, like we talked about the origins of hip hop. But somebody, some social engineer somewhere was like, oh, let's infuse the music with self-hate and like self-defeating cognitions and affect and things like that. And so now it's poison. But we don't know because we still eating it like, oh, wow, this is good. But it's like realizing like soul food can kill you. And so I would say the art is really just my authentic self. Like sometimes I do be on the fence, and that's been my experience growing up because I'm exposed to all these different things, and it's my choice to like, well, how do I want to maneuver, or how do I get through these certain situations. I posted something online, it was like a question, which I posed to the audience here. Suppose you're a teacher or a mentor or a parent, and your child or your student or your mentee comes up to you and they're like, I just got jumped. Like, what do you say to them? Now consider if they go to their friend and they're like, yo, I just got jumped. What is their friend gonna say to them? And then think about, as the child, who do you go to? If somebody came up to you and they put a gun in your face and robbed you, who you gonna tell? You gonna go to school and tell your teacher? Or you gonna go to your homie and tell him? And what can the teacher do for you? What can your friend do for you? And that's that fence that you straddle, is like, how do I handle the real things I'm getting? I feel like that's part of the disconnect sometimes in terms of like education, because the teacher not really gonna risk their own life for yours most of the time, especially if they got kids. But at the same time, your man might risk his life for you, but he might not care about his own life. And so some people I feel like some people ready to die because they scared to live, or like some people been through so much trauma or they had certain experiences, so they already on edge, like at any day I'll die for any reason. That's kind of the mindset. And so it's difficult, I think, growing up in that and seeing it in the midst of it, you know, it's hard to appreciate it, but then when you leave, it's like, oh, that's camaraderie. That's no different from if we went to Iraq and your life on the line and my life on the line, I'm making sure you live and you're making sure I live. So when you look at the peace, like in Indomitable Messiah, you see like wolves, and that's the pack, and it comes from, I'm making sure you survive, you're making sure I survive. Somebody mess with you, I got you. Somebody mess with me, you got me, and we protect each other. And I titled it Indomitable Messiah because I think it was, I might be off a little bit, but hopefully this inspires you to do more research. Like, don't take this as like the end all be all. Like, if it's something I say that's a little off, please Google it or Bing it or whatever search engine you use. Like, indomitable means basically you can't be dominated, you're unstoppable. Nobody can subjugate you or oppress you. Messiah is like Jesus, or like the person that's supposed to come to liberate the people. Now Nixon, I believe Nixon wrote a letter to the FBI talking about some fear of a black Messiah rising. So when you think about like what's the motivation for killing Martin and Malcolm and all the black leaders, it's because there's a fear that white supremacists have, people in positions of power that benefit from the status quo they have of black people liberating themselves and getting from underneath the foot, like changing how we live. Because if we change how we live, that's gonna fuck up a lot of people's money, excuse me. That's gonna mess up a lot of people's money, because if you look at how, if somebody made $1 billion last year, that means whatever the status quo was last year, it benefited them that much. So if you change one dynamic in the system, it has ripple effects. So you can't really liberate black people with like, oh, we realize we ain't supporting liquor stores. If we ain't going to the liquor store no more, that's a lot of money that the city's losing, that a lot of businesses is losing, bars might lose money. Now, all of these ripple effects, drugs, you can't stop the drug game because so much is built off drug money. Crime, you can't stop crime because so much is built off crime money. Like if you get a parking ticket, that's a lot of money generated, because it's going to be about 30 people in court, 8 a.m., 11 a.m., 1 p.m., every single day. That's billions of dollars a year if you do the math. Like, and it's a system of like, you get the ticket, you go to court. Even if you talk to the public defender, all he's doing is like, if y'all see the fall from grace, he's doing what grace did. Like, they shuffle you through for pleas, and you end up paying money, but you don't get the points, or whatever the case is. So it's a whole system going on, and the painting is just highlighting that spirit that we have of like resistance. Like, we can't be dominant. You can kill Martin, you can kill Malcolm, you can kill any figurehead, but at the end of the day, black people are gonna rise up against white supremacy, against the oppression. We can't keep them down too long.
All right. Thank you. That's what's up. We listened to him all day, but we have a few more artists. We'll come back to him. I like that thing, by the way. I love it. Yes, great painting. Great painting. It's awesome. Let's talk about the portrait of Robinson, which I enjoy looking at. It just makes me happy. I'm not sure. I wanted to dance. Tell us about your portrait. Tell us about it. Is this your normal style?
This is my normal style now. I've been doing this for about a year, and when Laura said that she wanted to do a black and white show, I already had in mind what I was going to do. So the painting that is on the far left-hand side is called Adventures and Attitudes. The one with the black is called Amoeba 3. And it's interesting, a couple of the artists mentioned their mothers. And whenever I talk about my artwork, I always mention my mother. And in this case, I was thinking about my father. My father was a marine biologist and an oceanographer, and worked several years in the business field when I was a kid. And so Adventures and Attitudes is the name of a program or a seminar that he used to present. So a lot of people are making money on doing these type of seminars. You know, you pay X amount of dollars, you go to these seminars. My father was doing this back in the 70s. And the title just came to me as I was doing it. And then at the same time, I was thinking about my father's sketches. My father, again, was a marine a biologist and an oceanographer. And so his thing when he was in college, he said what gave him the higher grade was the fact that he could draw single-cell organisms. And he would do these black and white, very detailed drawings of microorganisms. So in doing these, in a sense, that was what was in mind. And how these originated was, I was thinking about my artwork, and mind you, the original paintings that I've done in the beginning were very brightly colored. And what I had in mind was my fiance's fashion design. At the time, I really didn't know what she did in fashion, but I just imagined my artwork on silk scarves. So that's what led to this layering. So if you can imagine these in color, that's how these originally started. So for me, the transition from color to black and white was fairly easy with Adventures and Attitude, the smaller painting. It's just watered down black paint. And so all I did was work in layers from my lightest hue. And as I work over the paintings, every time I do a layer, it gets darker. And then once I laid down the groundwork for the whole painting, then I went back in and tried to highlight or just give it a little bit more depth by adding a little bit darker hues to some of the shapes in there. And so I really enjoyed these. And as far as like playing music, with these I didn't play any music, which is strange for me. I always play music. Usually when I paint, I'm either listening to music or I have like documentaries running in the background, or I'm actually talking on the phone. And so with these, I was just in the zone and really enjoyed these.
Was it difficult to take the
No, it wasn't really difficult. The difficult part was the larger painting, the Amoeba 3. To be honest with you, the
black was a big cover-up, or is a big cover-up. I really didn't like what was happening, and I put the black in and just figured, all right, let me just make this work. And so that's where the two tones of black come into play. And I feel that it works. But at the same time, we're our own worst critics when it comes to our artwork. And so,
It's fine.
oh, thank you. But I definitely see where I want to go utilizing that particular style. And then also with the first one, Adventures in Attitude, I see where I want to go with that as well.
When you start?
The beginning of mid-December of 2019.
Now, what happened? How did you get here?
Falling in love, honestly. Joel, I did so, and I wanted to go in a different direction with my artwork as well as my life. And over the past 2 years, there's been a lot of changes with not only my relationships between, like, of course, my fiance, but my daughters and the people in my life. And so usually I do a lot of work in collage. I still love doing collage. And actually, I got some stuff in the background that's amazing. But I wanted to go in a different direction. And you also influenced me to really challenge myself in doing something new. Because it's funny, when you paint over the years, you get known for a certain thing, and then you get comfortable. You also get a little cocky, and then you find yourself repeating the same thing over again, and I don't like to get bored. And so, again, with me, I don't really get bored. It goes back to, I work in several different styles, and sculpture, printmaking, now fashion. So I'm always doing something new, but it's trying to keep everything cohesive and consistent. Thank you.
Charles. This is Charles Worthier, and the mantle. He has some history. Welcome back.
Hey, thank you very much.
Tell us about who you are.
Well, I'm old school. I'm Charles Caldwell. I'm a renowned artist throughout the United States. A lot of people probably haven't heard of me. I've been out of the limelight for a long time. Anyway, to make a long story short, I've been through what you've been through. I did a piece at NSFI, matter of fact, when they decided not to go with it because it was too contradictory. Like it was just too. The public wasn't ready for it. Where I depicted a police officer outside with his gun drawn and 3 blank faces on a brick wall. I was part of that blank face. Because every time I went home, all my friends was in the hood, and I wasn't a part of it. It's just that's all I drew. So I had to paint it. Yeah, the Star Ledger did all this big stuff. Is messed up. But make a long story short, I came out of that. I ended up having a lot of shows. I didn't do too many galleries. I normally just rent a loft or something and have like a 2-night show or 1-night show. But that was taught by me through my ex-agent, Anthony Clark. Some of y'all might know him through the City Without Walls or North Arts Council. And I sold hundreds and hundreds of art. My downfall, I never did any lithographs or declays. I always sold originals. I taught a lot, I gave a lot. I've been in big magazines, New York Post, a lot of shows, got a lot of stuff, different types of buildings. The only thing I can definitely say is that I stayed true to the game. I never lost my touch. I love it. When you guys are talking about sound, I actually paint sound. And actually, Star Legend did a big article on that. So when they did that, they was asking me how I did it. And everyone does paint sound, you just don't realize you're doing it. As soon as your head start bobbing, you start zoning out, that paintbrush or that pencil start tapping, you paint the sound. Literally. Literally. So, to make a long story short, I did a lot of celebrities' houses as well. But there's always downfalls and upscales in art. You know, if you don't use your talent wisely, you'll lose it. And if you don't respect it, you won't get respect. Like I said, I was two sides of the fences. I was arrogant, big-headed, and I didn't get my respect because I was arrogant. And I didn't know it, but it was told to me. And just like Cortez said, my life changed. You fall in love, you meet someone that tells you like it is, don't take no BS, and ever since that day, my whole life changed, literally. My focus is now on family, friends, you know, donating my time, donating funds, a lot of things that I never did before. And just to give back is so beautiful. Like I have a show coming up March 14th here, and I'm helping 2 other artists. You know, and I look at them as being great artists, up and coming. What else?
What's your background? Where you from?
I'm from Morristown, New Jersey, born and raised. Most of my time is in Newark. I did everything in Newark, just about. Graduated from Newark School of Fine Industrial Arts.
Tell us about this work. You draw this work, and you put it on.
Well, these pieces right here this is actually my signature portrait. When I do portraits of people's, whatever's in your life, like if you've been, let's say, a musician or a jogger or an author or a doctor or you name it, I will actually bring that out in the portrait. And it's not just a portrait, it's like your life, your life. And it's called Heroes of Faith. I did hundreds of them already. However, but that's not what I really do. That just pays my bills. What I really love doing, you'll probably see next Saturday, I love abstract. Just like when the work is different, I do all aspects of the art world, like printing. I do a lot of engineering, a lot of installations. I do a lot of weird art. You see some of my stuff, it's a little weird, but I love it. I love to take colors. I love to do a lot of colors. Like when I looked at his artwork and I seen the black and white and the colors, I love that. Yeah, it's different. And I inspire all artists. You can copy other artists, you can copy photos, but try to actually just in your mind, just think about something and just do it. Without no pictures, nothing, just do it and see how it comes out. You'll love it, trust me, I'll tell you. I did, when they did the documentary on me, I actually said that when Bernard Jackson was teaching us, remember, and Donald Miller. These are great artists, by the way. Like, there's one artist that was a photocopy of Raphael Brown. Yeah, taught me well, but I had to stray away from it. But I love the education because it taught me how to focus on how to put food on my plate, put it down. Like the other stuff, it's hard to get people to buy because it's coming from your heart, your soul. And when you realize what impact we have on society, when you do these pieces, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. That's why I really appreciate how you did it and how you say it and how you speak it. It's beautiful. I happen to mature a little bit more because I was you one day. At one time in my life, I was just like, trust me what I tell you. Cortez was too. We use a lot of SFIA. But just to make a long story short, I'm happy to be back. I'm loving it. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions,
Okay.
Stephen Miguel is the artist. So you teacher, and your art.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming out this evening, and this wonderful panel I have done many shows with these artists right here, and we go way back. Curtis and our children go to the same school since they were kindergarten. Charles and I have done shows together with Steve and Cortez, and Brad and I did a show together, and it's a pleasure meeting you. I'm sorry, your name again? Josh, a pleasure meeting you. So it's, I always love Akwaaba. Even though I've known the guys known for a little over a year, it's like family already. I've been artists for a much longer time, so I just thank you for that. Myself, I'm youngest of 5, grew up in a Jamaican home. My sister, Angela Ellis Williams, and her husband, Dennis Williams. So my sister's a very talented artist, educator, minister, name what she does. But we grew up in a Jamaican home, and even though we grew up in Maplewood, it felt like we definitely get a sense of Caribbean roots in the house. Parents were very disciplined as far as what we chose to do. They say, "Go be an artist, whatever you choose to, artist, educate, whatever you want to do, be the best you can be at it. Don't do it halfway. You're going to be an artist, be the best artist you can be. Don't play with it. You're going to be a teacher, the best teacher you can be. Educate your students and teach them well." So that's something that they instilled in us. They both work 2 jobs and work very hard. So they instilled the hard work ethic in us. So from there, I went to Columbia High School, where Curtis teaches in Maplewood, and I was very fortunate to be mentored and educated by Mr. Ani Struther, who's a very famous artist in the district, curator. He's top shelf. That's my art father. Mr. Struther and I are very close bond. And also I had the opportunity to go to Jersey City State College, which is now MJCU, and be educated by Professor Ben Jones. So that's 2 huge people in my life that mentored me, and sometimes the mentoring and teaching took a strange turn sometimes. Colorful language was used to motivate me, but it's all part of the learning process. I try to tell my students that. I have a young lady who's in the hallway, walking down the hallway. I teach over at Central High School, my 25th year of teaching. I heard her walk down the hall, and she points to my room and she says, "And I don't like his class right there." So I'm like, okay. So yesterday class, I said, "Come on, let me talk to you." She's like, "She came over, and she does work, and she'll do one day she'll work for 30 minutes, she'll be like, okay, that's it, I'm done. I won't do anything else, play my phone." So I'm like, see, you do just the minimum. If you work like that every day, you put your heart into every day, you can be an excellent artist. So I'm gonna write you, and that's how I do it. So I wanna see you push yourself. And so she kind of rolled her eyes, like, okay, I understand. So then she's starting to, hopefully she's gonna turn herself around. But that's how I was taught, so that's why I'm still in my school. So I'm old school. So I heard somebody say that they're old school because that's how I am. So my work is, I do oils, and this right here is a pencil series that I was working on. I try to work with people that I feel that have left a serious lasting impression in the world, whether it be musicians and turn lyrics to their songs, or it be poets or writers, political figures that we can look at now or 50 years from now, they still remember some of the words they said. I started out college doing single images, but over here, this Maya Angelou piece, I took the poem "Phenomenal Woman," and this picture, this image right here is probably in her 40s or so, and here's probably in her 20s, especially now being a father of triplets. My daughter Tiffany's over here, and I want to see, not only my daughter, but the young ladies I teach embracing themselves. Going through the teenage years is kind of awkward, but I want you to embrace yourself. You're a phenomenal woman, whether you're 17, 47, 57, 67, you're a phenomenal woman. So she's embracing herself and loving herself, different stages of her life. So that's where that came from for this piece right here. The Marvin Gaye piece is taken from a few different images. It was during the riots in the late 60s, early 70s, and that's him with police in front of him. I found some images of police, and also the background with the city being fire, also probably being looted, and also I wanted to have that be sort of him looking back and saying, "This whole thing makes me want to holler," taking from one of his songs. So he kind of has a distressed look on his face, and that's where that came from. Also, my children, when I started drawing it, they're like, "Who's Marvin Gaye?" And so it's a teachable moment for me. My children ask me about music, so I play some of the music. But they hear the music, like, oh, okay. So they kind of, even though they were born, I wasn't even born that time, but they can kind of get a sense of what the world was going through at that time. And Laura first called me up about this show, and she said, okay, Stephen, black and white. So I was trying to see who's going to get away with it. I was like, oh, black and white was like a little bit of color. She's like, no, black and white. So I said, how about black and white like in the background? No, Stephen, black and white. I was trying to legally get myself, trying, enable the system a little bit, but it wasn't going to happen. So I said, okay, I'll play by the rules, be black and white. Then I said to myself, I always wanted to do black and white and kind of fuse that together with like some color. So I said, how about this black and white with graphite and fuse it together with watercolors? So I took the liberty to something I just finished, and this is the first time I had it out. Oh my God! This is called Kobe All Day. So this is watercolor and graphite. So this is a fusion of graphite pencil. Actually, this is a limited edition G-Clay. It's not the original. So this is graphite pencil here, and also watercolor, layers of watercolor on top of each other. So this right here came from, this background image came first. And from there, the whole thing was done in graphite first. So I said, how do I try to use some of the graphite, some of the watercolor, and kind of make it fit together? So I did him in gold and trying to incorporate the Laker colors. And I tried to do different shades of purple, some like bluish purple, some very deep dark, a little bit of black. And then I got a little abstract with it, and tried to do some loose kind of white on top of the yellow, on top of the gold and the purple. So also with the graphite and even some of the gold and yellow-orange in his hair, and even uniform, different shades, yellow, orange. So I try to get different parts of his life when he was very young, go back to him from like in the 90s. And then here, if you notice, last year he won the Academy Award. I try to incorporate that in the front as well. So I try to get the entire 20 years plus of his career. And unfortunately, we lost him. But I wanted to give him his due and give him the respect that he deserves.
You the man!
We got time for some work.
All right. I'm having a bit of okay. Now, I have a question. As black artists, we often put in this box. So we do things that are, we always try to paint historical figures in sort of like this respectable way to say, hey, we have value, or we're good people, or whatever it is, to uplift ourselves. But there are other aspects to our personality as well. We play, we dream, we have fun, that sort of thing. And when you guys choose your subject matter and the style you're going to work in, do you ever think, I just want to play. I want to have some fun with this. I want to see where this could take me outside of what I think my responsibilities as a black artist should be. And how much thought do you give to that?
Well, I could say this, you have to follow your heart, you know. I mean, when I started doing graffiti, it was because I loved it, you know. And I remember an artist who came to shows portfolio when I was in college. And he had this amazing book, you know, these illustrations. And you go, wow, it's like, his illustrations were just like popping on the page. And somebody asked him, well, you know, how do you come up with this? He said, you have to fall in love with your subject matter. Whatever it is you're doing, if you're painting this cup or drawing this cup, make sure you fall in love with it. And I think that's the secret, falling in love with it. Perfectly said. Anyone else?
I remember my professor, Professor James A. Brown, he asked me as I was an A student, I was the only black male in the program at that time. And he said, he said, Curtis, do you want to take on that responsibility? Do you want to be the artist that has that boulder on your back? You may just want to just create and just paint. Some artists will take that time. You know, as an artist, as a black artist, we all struggle with that because the things that happen in your life and everything, you should be recording history as well, really document it, and it can tell a story. But sometimes, like back in the 60s and 70s, artists that wasn't portraying as far as the riots or the civil rights movements and everything like that, people were looking at those artists and like, well, why aren't you documenting that? And like artists like, Norman Lewis was like, I just want to paint. I'm just painting. I'm painting abstract at that. So, you create your own voice and everything, but we struggle a lot. We struggle a lot as far as, am I going to create for myself? Am I creating as far as for just work that may sell or be marketable? Am I creating work or whatever that's just gonna fit for the time or the genre or whatever purpose and everything? So there's a lot of fences that we have to struggle. We're the only ones, either black artists, artists of color, that have to identify. And now what's happening, I realize if you look at a lot of artists that's happening now, they're thinking more global. So in a way they're thinking global, but they're also pulling away from the narrative of being as far as artists of color or a black artist. So now you're just being known as an American artist because they're thinking as far as outside of the country and you are from the United States of America or whatever, but you're being seen, from there. But people still identify. But it's a way of, my professor, it's a way of playing the game.
Right.
Kerry J. Marshall said or whatever, he's considered as far as an American artist, but by him being an American artist, the scope is opened up this wide for him. So now his work is that much in volume and everything else, So there's a difference that we have to play compared to some of the other rules that the art, market is dictating.
Thank you, Curtis. We'll close it out with Cortez.
I always take the approach, if I'm touching subject matter that is dead serious, touching on civil rights or whatever, I still want to have fun with it. I want you to look at my artwork and I try to make it in such a way where it might be a serious subject matter, but I'm still going to have fun with it. It's still going to be whimsical. If you want to get technical with it, something like this would be me veering off the path and, in a sense, not saying anything as a black artist. But at the same time, I have the skill where I could take something like this and be covert with the message and say something, but at the same time not say something. So it really depends on the viewer, in my case.
Thank you. Everyone, please ask some questions of this artist. First panel, questions, when this is over.
I have a question.
We have Laura.
Akwaaba family, and thank you for doing the artist talk tonight. For everyone who's here, we just celebrated our first anniversary on February 15th. Akwaaba alive. 20 years from now, 30 years from now, I want to be here doing the same things. Looking forward to the next year, and we have a couple of shows coming up that's scheduled already. I mentioned before, our all-female show is going to be on March 28th. March 14th, Charles, you have a show here as well. And that's gonna be for one night.
Yep, one night. It's gonna be good. It'll be great to see all that.
May the 4th, Walter is gonna have a show here as well. Solo, first solo. I need to say this one, I'm not gonna do it, I keep putting it off. So June the 6th, we're gonna have a benefit for the gallery, our official Kente Ball. And it's gonna be coming to America, meet Wakanda, dressed in African attire or cocktail attire. June 6th, mark your calendars. And all the artwork in the gallery is available for sale. Everything that has a red dot was sold already, but the stuff without a red dot is available for sale. If you need to purchase something, if you're interested in, supporting the gallery by purchasing art, speak to me. We have a payment plan as well. We can do 3 months if you want. We can do 6 months payment plan. But the way we keep the gallery going, the way we keep the artists going is we support them by purchasing their work. And thank you all for coming here tonight.